Hi guys, Dave Pinson here, Video for Jesus. Today I want to talk about modern idolatry. What is idolatry? Idolatry, we always think about the worship of idols. Well, that's what idolatry is, worshiping idols. Well, we don't have little statues that we worship today, so obviously idolatry doesn't talk, it's not about us, obviously. It's about those people back in the back times, when they used to stone people to death and all that stuff. Those hard times. We don't live in those times. Of course, there's no idolatry today, except there is, because idolatry comes from the heart. And so I have a verse to go along with this, and it says, modern idolatry, Colossians 3:5, fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. So he gives another list. There's several places in the New Testament where we have a list of sins. So some people think, well, it doesn't matter what I do, but go read the. Well, that's not really a sin. It's the actual word wasn't really this. It was actually not that, but it actually is. It's very simple. The Bible is very simple, especially when it comes to sin. But the main thing it says here is covetousness, covetousness, covetousness. I think it's covetousness is idolatry. What does that mean? Covetousness is wanting what's not yours. And it's actually one of the 10 Commandments, right? Thou shalt not covet anything. I should not covet. So when it's talking about evil desires and whatnot, so that means you want something that you don't have. That's why you desire it. Desire, right? So things in your heart, things in your the flesh, the covetousness, or wanting the position, wanting the money, wanting the power, wanting anything you covet. What does covet mean? It means like you must. I gotta have it. There's a feeling that I fight with the flesh almost every day. Somebody say we're not sinners, and I always say I don't want to go around telling myself, I'm just a sinner saved by grace, because I think that we're born again and God's given us a new heart, and I don't want to lower my. I don't think Jesus would ever introduce me as, oh, this is my son David. He's a sinner. I don't think he would do that. He'd say, this is my son David. So, but at the end of the day, yeah, I fight it every day. I fight covetousness every day, and and I can tell you right now, my flesh, and there's these desires, these things, these sometimes it could be anger, it could be pride, it could be many things that you covet, and you have to say, okay, hold the presses. That's not right. That's not right. How is that idolatry? Because you're actually worshiping yourself. So it says it because you're wanting something for you, and that's where it all stems from. That's where self-centeredness and selfishness, which is sin. That's where it all comes from. It's covetousness is wanting something that's not yours, or just wanting what the other person has, right? So lately I've been following this story. This guy named Nick Fuentes. I didn't really I don't follow modern pop culture too much, to be honest with you. Um, But some of the guys that I do watch occasionally have been talking about him. It's been a huge thing, this guy, Nick Fuentes. I'm not going to talk about him. I think he's pretty much a despicable. He has some good things to say, but he's also sort of despicable. And he looks at life through a racial um, lens, which I don't have. And he was against Charlie Kirk, and I love Charlie Kirk. And just gonna let that go. But I've been watching some of these guys they're very interesting. One of them is named Dave Smith. Normally I don't drop names, but this isn't really 100% like I'm not thrashing these people, so it's okay. I'm not judging. I'm discerning what they're saying. Okay, listen to me. So I'll just go with him because the other one's way too controversial. I'll just go with that name because if I drop the other name, a bunch of people will just turn this video off probably. So he's a libertarian guy, and he doesn't agree with all the conservatives. There's a battle between over Israel and some certain things that's going on, and I don't really care because I don't belong to those people. I belong to Jesus, right? But it's interesting that I hear him and I hear some of these other people say Patrick Ben David is another guy, a valuetainment guy that I enjoy listening to now and then. He's a smart guy. They got a lot of good things. They have all kinds of people on their programs up from different views and stuff. They're not all the way one sided, but they do tell you who they are. They're not ashamed of what they believe. But these guys, this Dave Smith and Patrick McDavid. There's others. There's actually everybody, even some of the Christian people that I watch and now and then. I don't have anybody that inspires me like A.W. Tozer and Leonard Ravenhill and some of the old guys. I don't have anybody living today that inspires. Steve Gregg is probably my favorite Bible teacher, and he's got a couple amazing books, but he's not the kind of inspirational kind of guy. He's a really good teacher. But they all say so. And he's not one that says this, but the others they say, like even this one, I forgot her name. Gosh, I'm dropping names. I could give you her name. She's a Christian. She's pretty Alice or Alec. Anyway, it doesn't matter what her name is. It's pretty much irrelevant. But they all say, "Well, you're not very big if you only have 10,000 followers." That's when I was nothing. I only had 1,000 followers, and that's because to them a million is a good number. But those people they don't. I go with the important people, the influencers, the the important people, and I'm thinking, no, that's not important to God. It's not important. It doesn't. Like I said before, we're very small here. 20, I get 20 people watching a video. I am excited because it only takes a handful to turn the world upside down, and we're not looking to. But I do covet that. That was my point. I do covet it. I do, but I don't think it makes you nothing. If I had 1,000 followers every day that watch my videos, I would feel like God was using me mightily. If I have one, I feel like God can use me mightily. And I really believe that now. It's taken me a while, but I do covet that. I covet that kind of fame, and I covet that kind of influence, and I covet that kind of person. But so covetousness is a very real thing in the world. Some people covet, like I say, some people covet like a person's wife. She's so beautiful. Gosh, I wish I had or they covet a person's wealth, or they covet. And I guess I'll just close with this. In the book of Romans, it tells us that everyone knows there's a God. It basically, let me just paraphrase Romans 1, I think 1 and 2 for you. We'll just paraphrase what I think is the important part in Romans 1 and 2. Everybody knows there's a God because of creation. By the way, in the book of John, it says God give light to every man. So I'm sorry, my Calvinist friend. We're not totally depraved because everybody has that light. Everybody knows there's a God. So we're not totally depraved. Sorry. Wrong. Click. Anyway, that's another story. But it says because everyone knows there's a God, and let me just tell you what it basically is talking about. So therefore, you should seek Him. If you know there's a God and you don't seek Him, that means because why? Because you don't want to. Because why? Because of yourself. Because you want things. There's things you covet in this world. There's things you want, and you don't want any. You don't want there to be a God. I think Aldous Huxley is a very famous atheist back in the early 1900s. I don't remember when. 20th century guy. And they asked him. They said, "Well, when maybe late 19th, no, 20th century." And they asked him when Darwinism came out, and they were like, he says, "Why do you think we've embraced this and we've never found the evidence?" And they still haven't found it, by the way, my macroevolution friends. Why do you think we've embraced that as a culture, and we still haven't found any evidence to prove that species would evolve into species? And he was very honest with his answer because he's an atheist, and he says, "Because we don't want God. So any way we can find to kick God out of the story, we're going to do it. Why?" And that's what it says in Romans 1. It says, because they know there's a God, but because they refuse to seek Him. In other words, it doesn't even say because they accepted Him as their Lord and Savior. It doesn't say that. It says they refuse to seek Him. That's all. If you know there's a God, you think, there's someone that created the universe. Maybe I should see if I can know who they are. Not by going to church. And I don't believe in churchiosity. I don't believe churches necessarily have the answers. Some do. The answer's in there in most of them. But most of it's man-made. So that's another story. I'm always talking that harp, and that harp will continue to talk. But it says everybody knows their God, so they don't turn to God. So why? And then it says, so it says in Romans 1, so I gave their heart over to evil. So that they would it actually talks about homosexuality, man for the man, woman for the woman. That's what came out of that dark heart because they wouldn't follow God. So that's just an aside issue. Why are people gay according to the Bible? That's part of it. That's a big part of it. Because they refuse to honor God or follow Him or seek Him or have a Lord. But it also says that they will worship themselves. It says they will worship everything. They will worship everything in nature. They will even worship animals and everything in nature. People do worship everything in nature. They do worship animals over the years, and they do worship the sun and the moon and all that stuff, right? And they worship themselves. It says at the image of man. Right? So because you know there's a God, you don't follow God. Then God gave you a heart, and it says they would even these people would even not only would they say that it's okay for a transgender is a good thing, and it's okay for a child to mutilate their body through drugs or chemicals or surgery to become something that God didn't make them to be. In other words, an abomination of destroying people's lives and their hearts and their souls for the devil, right? Not only it says not only do you like those things, but you do those things. Some of those things are secret, or you covet others. So this is where covetousness comes from worshiping people. It really does, or from desiring people, from desiring things. So idolatry today, that's what it is, guys. It's wanting something that's not yours, or wanting to be like that famous person. God, I wish I could just be like that Wes Huff guy. Everybody was watching me and they thought I was smart. It's very important to me that people think that I know what I'm talking. I do know what I even thought about. I'm gonna do a video and I'm gonna tell everyone my education and why that I know stuff and that you can trust me. And even though I don't have a title and I don't wear a collar, and you can still trust what I'm saying is true. But we'll just let God do that because God's my algorithm. And I pray, Lord, I pray that the Lord would help me not to covet anymore. And I know that that's a tough one. So let's watch out for that modern day idolatry because it's an abomination to God. God bless you guys. Ta ta for now.